My name is Mitchel Strumpf. I am trained largely in the study of music as part of culture. And I am an individual who has been observing the cultures of the world, having been blessed with the opportunity to do quite a bit of travel and living with different cultures. And I cherish the life that I have had and my relations with different cultures of Africa. And I also find it, I think, something that did not just happen, that Tanzania has been a focal point in my life for over 50 years. When I first came here in 1966 and worked not with music at that time, although I did have a little penny whistle band and drum band at the primary school that I taught at on the other side of Tanzania. I was an American Peace Corps volunteer teaching science and agriculture in the primary schools to grades 5, 6, and 7, the upper primary schools in Tanzania. And from this, at a young age, as I say, I was 23 years old, I was able to then get into my music studies, which I already had a first degree in music, was able to get into my music studies to be more focused on the music traditions of Africa. And I had an opportunity to continue my stay in Africa, living in Ghana, on the other side of the continent, which in the first place was almost unique because very few scholars have the whole continent in their backgrounds. So I have a good, strong feeling for East Africa, but I also have many years of living in West Africa, in Ghana and Nigeria especially, and doing my studies in West Africa. So I did a master's degree on music traditions in the northwestern corner of Ghana. Especially, my emphasis was on the funeral music traditions of northwestern Ghana, and continued my ethnomusicological study that combined with music education and seeing how music education should be an understanding and appreciation of music cultures, whether they are your own music culture or somebody else's music culture. And so it's great pride to understand other people through their agreements on music making. And so I can really go anywhere and listen and observe music making and try to get the most out of understanding the music and appreciating the music and appreciating the culture from where the music has come from. So I've devoted the last 50 years of my life to doing that, especially in Africa, although I've traveled to many other parts of the world. And then, as I said, the cycle has just about come to an end because I'm ready perhaps to have retirement soon. But I have started my professional career mostly in Tanzania, and I've been around Africa and come back to Tanzania. And starting in the young primary schools of Tanzania and then ending at the university as a professor at the university, and coming after retirement at the University of Dar es Salaam, coming to this wonderful institution of the Dhow Countries Music Academy and developing the academic program in music here.
What do you think is the major change in Dhow music since you first encountered it? And how is the music scene evolving right now?
Question about my observations over 50 years of the music traditions of Africa. Okay, do we have a few hours to...
Well, maybe he...
Yes, okay, that's fine. Of course, music traditions change as cultures change around the world, and this is very healthy and should not be prevented, but should perhaps be cherished for change. We are not static, and human beings are not static. They are influenced by so many things. Geography, for example, influences the way people live their lives, the way people think. Here on the island of Zanzibar, being surrounded by the beautiful Indian Ocean, it affects the way of life tremendously. It affects the pace of life. It reflects the feelings of one person towards another. It reflects how you do not pass by a friend without greeting. You do not express your feelings of another individual and just rush off and do something. So agriculture, location, a way of living expresses everything. And this has been perhaps lost a bit as cities have grown in Africa, as music traditions are not made from the soil, not made from the available trees around. The sounds of wood, the sounds of nature in the music making has perhaps changed for an instrument like an electric keyboard, which is as far away from nature as possible, rather than a drum from the village, made from a local tree, made from goat skin, and is really a sound of nature coming through in the music. Also, I think many things have changed in the participation of people in music making, where in a village, music making is something that everybody participates in. It is not something where, as in the Western world, a person could possibly sit motionless and just intellectualize music making. It is impossible in Africa. It is impossible in Africa to sit motionless and just focus your ears or your eyes on music making. So I'll say that again, it is impossible in Africa to have an audience, to have an African audience sit and just listen, whether they are contemplating about the sound or not, but you move to what you are hearing. So movement and sound has to go together in Africa. And also the expression of communicating a thought in words is most often found in African musical presentations. A singer sings words. I, as a Westerner, sometimes have no idea about the words being heard, or you could go to an opera and not at all understand the words being sung, but you listen for other things as a Western person. But in Africa, this doesn't happen. You move to sounds, you feel sounds, you accept thoughts and the words being expressed in songs, and you are together. You have a feeling of community music making. If you are at an event, you clap your hands to the beat. You move to the beat. You observe certain things about the performer that in the Western world you do not. And you get the humanness of the performer making music. A performer does not stand still. A pianist cannot possibly play an emotional piece and look like a statue in an African context. They feel the music and they move to the music and they express the music through themselves very much more. So over the 50 years, even popular music has drastically changed in Africa. Some of the music traditions that came back from or came from European countries or the United States, and also came back, such as after slavery, when African people came back to West Africa, to Liberia, for example, or to Ghana, they brought traditions that they were influenced by in the United States or in South America, and brought those traditions back. And so consequently, the music that became popular music traditions started to develop in areas along the West African coast as the African population came back from North and South America. And we had the guitars entering Africa, and we had other wind instruments coming through missionaries, and we had marching bands of European countries playing clarinets and flutes and trombones, and we had then different types of popular music expressions developing. So this created a totally different popular music tradition. And of course, amplification has changed African music, popular music, and African music very much. Even 30 or 40 years ago, some of the traditional African instruments, there were found ways to electrify them so that the sound could be heard over larger groups of people. Where 50 years ago, there was no such thing as a larger group of people. We would have people who made up a small audience, and you could play your mbira or play your string instrument, and it would be heard. You wouldn't need amplification for thousands of people. You'd have just the village to perform with. So there was no need for amplification. So amplification came, electronic amplification came for larger audiences, for spaces like arenas, for football stadiums, and so the popular music became totally different from the popular music of 50 years ago. So this has changed greatly. Also, tonalities have changed from local cultures, which in many cases were quite different from Western cultures, where semitones or major and minor scales were no longer the means of expression, but the cultures had different tonalities in many, many different African cultures. The role of DCMA in the community life of Zanzibar. Actually, DCMA is a magnificent project that was totally comes from the enthusiasm of the community for the people of Zanzibar and for the musical traditions that have come and passed through Zanzibar over many centuries. So it is such a wonderful place that has been influenced by so many cultures, and consequently, over the years, people of Zanzibar have picked up what is of their likings of the music traditions that came over thousands of years. Some of these traditions, the greatness of some of these traditions were fading away. And approximately 15 years ago, it was felt by some of the community people interested in culture that this should not happen, that the greatness of a culture should be kept up and should not fade away as other traditions come and take over the culture. So a group of community leaders got together and they said, the young people of Zanzibar are making their music traditions, but these music traditions are too much of the lower types of culture that might come from many distant lands by radio especially, and by television that came to Zanzibar quite early. Television was one of the earliest places in Africa was in Zanzibar, where television broadcasting came. This is untrue for the mainland of Tanganyika, because the mainland of Tanganyika, Tanzania, was one of the last places in Africa to get television, but Zanzibar one of the first. And the influences came very rapidly through the early days of television, and consequently many of the traditions, the rich cultural traditions, especially in music, were being lost very quickly by transmissions, especially of radio.
How is music perceived in Zanzibar, which is predominantly a Muslim community?
Such a very difficult question about music and Islam, music and Muslim traditions. From what I gather is that it's the name. what is music and how is music, or how musical sounds are part of people's lives in relation to Islam. Certainly there's a lot of sounds that people from other cultures might call music that are made in the beliefs of Islam, but it's not called music. So the whole relationship of sounds in relation to the praising of Muhammad cannot be anything that will take your mind away from the praising of Muhammad. And consequently, things that people in other cultures might appear to be acceptable for cultures are deemed unacceptable. So it's a very very unclear line of what is music and what is acceptable as musical sound in Islamic cultures.
Can you just repeat the question and the answer as much as possible?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, how does DCMA help kids stay out of the streets or away from drugs or any other things? And in what ways does it offer an alternative to that kind of life?
Okay. Well, the question is, how does DCMA effectively bring goals to the young people of Zanzibar in the area of the arts? Goals that will put them on paths for development rather than paths for harm to their lives. And consequently, I think the Dhow Countries Music Academy is very successful. We do have young people coming here who have nothing else in life. They have no possibility of assisting their families economically. They have no possibilities of gaining an education and then possible higher employment. So this is a place where there is hope. Young people come with the idea because they love the sounds that they hear, but also they feel possibly, I have no other alternative, but possibly the Dhow Countries Music Academy can give me something that will help me have a life filled with goals that can be accomplished. And it's very heartwarming to see that we are giving something to people who have very, very little to expect in other areas. In fact, it's one of the very few locations in Zanzibar that does that. Young people, if they do not have the outlet to improve themselves at a school like the Dhow Countries Music Academy, can really feel worthless, and it's a crime. It's a crime to let that happen to so many people. Our students come from a culture, though, however, where the arts and music has a rather low status in culture. Many families do not want their sons or daughters to go into an area of entertainment because the feeling is that these are the failures. These are the people who did not become teachers, did not become, of course, higher professions like doctors. But these are the people who have failed. They sing. They just sing. They just play a guitar. So always the feeling of just, as if it is a lower end of social success. And consequently, it's very hard to get your parent, if you live here or if you live on the mainland, your parent to say, "Oh, I'm proud that my child is studying music." But more the case would be, "I'm very happy if my child studies, but not music. You know, music is the low end of education spectrum. So we try, however, and we are very happy when we have students who do reach success, that we make it known to the public the success that they have. Very often, if I do introductions of our students in performances, we make note of what their lives were before and what now they can have great respect for themselves. We have some students who were newspaper sellers, which is a very menial sort of job, getting the newspapers that come from Dar es Salaam and then sell them and earn very small amounts, or people who did, if at all, having any type of job, menial jobs, but now they come to the Dhow Countries Music Academy and they have something to look forward to. And we do try to give our students praises for their hard work in music making, which again is something else that in general they do not get anywhere else. But if a person is a wonderful performer on the guitar, is a wonderful singer, the praises are very important to them in their lives also.
Okay, how do you explain, oh wait, no, I know, I'm just saying, okay, sorry. How do you explain like the low percentage of female students at the CMA? And then what can you tell us about Rahma, which was, as far as we know, the first student who graduated?
Okay. Well, culture is an important thing to talk about when you're going to talk about an issue like you just raised, because a culture, and the way I always teach about culture, is a set of vast numbers of agreements amongst people. And for a long time, the agreement was that a female is in the home to make the home a home, to raise children, of course, and to care for the necessities of the home and child raising. So the idea of going into a profession, and historically the mindset of seeing females in music making has been again at the low level of the spectrum, where it was always considered that a female was an entertainment. If they went into music, was there as entertainment, and always considered of prostitution or satisfying the entertainment with other not socially acceptable ways. So getting a daughter, a beautiful daughter, to go into a possible low level of the social spectrum was always considered not very something to be hoped for. However, when we come to a school like this and we offer degrees or diplomas and certificates, and the young person, whether it is a male or a female, the young person to come home with a certificate, it's a very wonderful thing when you have nothing else to look forward to life, whether it is a boy or a girl or a young man or a young lady, to come home with such a symbol of success. It is really something to be cherished and to lead a person higher into their goals. Now, we have had a number of young ladies come through DCMA who have had great success. And you asked about Rahma. Rahma is a magnificent musician. She has learned the performance skills of playing the violin in a very fine way, and has been complimented by people from all over the world who have heard her perform, and she's traveled and toured through Germany, Poland, Zimbabwe, and other international locations, and she is honored very much by her performances. She also, through our certificate and diploma class, is now a scholarly musician, a person who knows the theories of music, knows how to explain what is happening in the music, whether it be of a Western type or of an Arab type of music tradition. And she can stand up before anybody in the world and discuss music as part of both Western and Arabic traditions. And besides that, she has become a person who can express herself through her violin playing in a way of expression and communication, which is something that we try to get our musicians, of course, to do. They communicate not just by playing notes, but they communicate by phrasing, just as a person speaking. All the qualities of a successful orator is the same like the qualities of a successful musician. So Rahma can express all of the emotions of the violin through the phrasing, through the dynamic changes, through the articulation. So she's a person who has the knowledge of communicating in a brilliant way messages that are significant. And so she can stand up proudly, communicate with her voice and communicate with her violin in a way that anybody else who is a well-educated and well-artistically educated person can do. So we are very proud of her. We are also very proud that now she is playing in the National Tarab Orchestra, and of which there are so few females playing instruments, musical instruments. They, through culture and the agreement again that I talked about culture, the female is usually the person who sings rather than plays a musical instrument. So we're very proud of Rahma and others who are here now. And our school is getting a better reputation for making this sort of cultural change, that the agreement is not that the female does not perform on an instrument. We have female pianists, we have females playing string instruments. We have yet to get females playing wind instruments, which across Africa and across much of the world, females do not play many wind instruments, many aerophone instruments. But we will be striving for that also, like in the Western world where you have magnificent flutists or clarinetists or even brass instruments. We should try more of that here.
Thank you. This is the last question from my end. You were talking about career paths and like the way you try to like craft along with students, like their kind of
Career? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what are the options for them after they graduate from BCMA?
The options for a career with music in a country or in a section of the country like Zanzibar and in the whole country of Tanzania are not too easy. However, frequently when the situation looks difficult, it opens up doors to many things. In the Western world, frequently we are oversaturated. We are saturated with so many musicians that are well trained that they too cannot find work. They too cannot find positions. More positions, however, in the Western world are in teaching, because there's much more music education, and consequently you can become a well-educated musician and become a good teacher who can find employment. This is what we have to do in most of Africa, is to improve music's position in education so that we do have qualified people in the primary and secondary schools, and consequently a person can improve their musical abilities to be performers, but also to be good music teachers. And if we had that happening in Tanzania, we could have a large number of people going into employment in music education. And then those who have further experience and further possibilities to become performers can do that. But I think whether even if you are a great performer, you are still a teacher. So music education is, I think, the secret to getting more people well qualified with music abilities and also have employment. I've been very happy to have become friends and the teacher of Samuel. He is a man of great ability, especially on the kanun. And I think his whole life has been very much influenced by his parents and the whole life of tarab and the sounds of the maqam system of tonalities. He is struggling to use all of this natural talent for his life's earnings. He has had some very nice international experiences. He was a great success when we went to Estonia, and he presented his kanun playing to a very large audience who are very interested to have him come back. He has been doing quite a bit of international performing with always great success. He performed at the New York University in Abu Dhabi, and I think was very successful there. Now, what his future could be, we don't know. He is not. I don't believe he has any interest in fusion type music. He does, I'm sure, does not want to see the music of the kanun being used for particularly popular music of Zanzibar. So I don't know. He is a magnificent musician, and I think he will continue to have great success. I wish he would follow in his father's footsteps as a composer, because his father was a composer of many of the popular tarab songs, and his mother was a great tarab singer, and he is such a fine singer, so I think that will be his future. But again, it would be good, as I said before, music education might be what would be very good for him, and he could be an excellent teacher in the music traditions that he knows so well. Us.